Thanks again for doing this.
Sure.
So I'm excited to talk to you. You are a very interesting person. I mean, grew up in the US, now a representative for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You're the former head Lama of the Kalmyk Republic and the reincarnation of a Buddhist saint. But you know what I'm dying to know is your favorite American band still the Smashing Pumpkins?
They're always going to be my favorite. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. They're classics that will never fade away. And over time, there has been a lot of new bands that have come up. The trend has changed. Everything changes. Just like in Buddhism, they describe nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary, right? So, but nevertheless, the memories of the great, wonderful musicians will always live on. Just like the teachings of Buddha. Buddha existed over 2,500 years ago, but his teachings and wisdom is relevant even today. So I'm sure that it will be like that with the musical world, that their lyrics, their emotions, their feelings that they have expressed through music will definitely live on, and hopefully just like the teachings of Buddha for thousands of years.
I love how you tied it in. That's what I have really appreciated so far about Mongolia is it's a high contrast place. You've got the new and the old, but just like you were saying, it's just like the human experience to have the feelings and want to express them, whether it's through music or through other forms of art. But it's just so interesting to me that the Smashing Pumpkins is such a 1990s Midwest thing. I grew up in Nebraska, not far from where you spent time in Erie, Colorado.
Right.
And so I was thinking how interesting it is that you have that very like classic American Midwest perspective. But then at age 7, you also moved to India to study Buddhism. How much of that contrast did you actually feel in that moment as a 7-year-old?
Well, I've been very fortunate to be born in America. The way that I usually describe myself, because I was born in America, I kind of describe myself as made in USA, right?
I like that.
And because I grew up in India and spent my adolescent years in India, I describe myself as assembled in India. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I got involved in helping a region where my parents and grandparents are originally from, which is Kalmykia. It is a Mongol ethnic group that has been part of the Russian civilization for the last 400 years or so. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I got involved in helping the community there to restore, rebuild, reintroduce Buddhism. So therefore, I describe myself as being distributed in Russia. And because of the sanctions now, the war between Russia and Ukraine, that because of the sanctions, my product is no longer needed in Russia. So, distributed and marketed in Mongolia. Absolutely. I was going to say that I've been very fortunate to grow up and spend a lot of time in different countries, different environments, different cultures. And it's always been enriching for me. Everybody has what we call calling or destiny, right? Or fate. And I truly believe that it was my destiny or my fate. Fate as in Fate. And that's what led me to India at the age of 7.
Because you felt that calling.
Yes, at a very young age, I always wanted to become a monk. And where every other child wanted to be dentist, police officer, fireman, or whatnot. In my case, it was always like I wanted to become a monk. And to my mother and my father as well, to them it was unusual because we don't have large monastic communities. Though my grandparents and parents, they were all spiritual and religious, they couldn't figure out why I come from a very big family, why my brother and sisters, they wanted to be something different and something that is very normal to them. And to me, wanting to become a monk, so to them, that was like, where is that coming from?
Because
Right.
you're the youngest of 9?
Yes.
So they were like, okay, parenting, we got this. We got these 8 other kids. And then you come along and you're like, hi, guys, I want to be a monk.
Right. In 1979, my parents had an opportunity to have a private audience with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, during his first trip to America. And I clearly remember my mother asking His Holiness that he wants to become a monk. I don't know what to do. What would you recommend? And His Holiness said, well, why don't you consider sending him to India? Because there's no monastic community here in America. And why don't you send him to India and we'll see what happens? And right then, both my parents decided to send me to India. And the following year, I was left for India. My mother took me to the monastery. She stayed around for a little while. She thought that it was just a phase. I was going to say, like, okay, I want to go home, like I want my KFC or, I want my McDonald's or whatever. Great, but it never happened. I remember very clearly at one point, it was like, Mom, you can go home now.
I
Right.
can only imagine you as a 7-year-old looking at your
So
mom and
my
saying,
mother, after spending about 3 months at the monastery, she left the monastery. She went to Delhi. And that was the ancient days where there was no internet or free calling and whatsoever. I assumed that she had left back home, but apparently she stayed in Delhi at a friend's place for about a month or so. And she came back to the monastery to check up on me to ensure that I was okay. So she came back and she stayed probably about another month or so. Then after that, then she felt like, okay, he's home.
did you feel at home or did you feel like,
Absolutely. I remember the same day, the very day that I arrived at the monastery, I started just running around with other little monks and playing with them, even though we didn't speak the language. But children, they're so innocent. They don't need language when it's playtime. So for me, it was just like fitting right into the mold.
and then later on, you did start to feel the pressure of basically reviving the religion in the region
So
and
I think the pressure comes at a later stage. I think we all go through this struggle of self-identification.
Mhm.
Why me? That was a big question for me because it was being recognized as a reincarnation and having that title comes with a lot of big responsibilities. There's that expectation that you have to continue the legacy of your previous incarnation, right? And there's that expectation that you are here for a reason, and that reason is to continue the legacy of your predecessor. And I think some people have choices, and some people don't have choices. And in my younger days, it was, I don't want to say difficult period, but I think it was a self-exploring and self-learning experience for me.
you were in your
There's
20s.
Yes, I became the head of the Buddhist of Kalmyk Republic in the Russian Federation at the age of 20. We're not trained and to lead and to revive, to redevelop or reintroduce Buddhism at that scale. So therefore, there was a lot of major responsibilities. The Soviet Union had just collapsed. It was a total mess, politically, economically, in so many ways. And you have to be involved in the process of the change, of the transformation. And being a 20-year-old, it's not an easy task. I look back and I definitely say that we all did a good job despite the challenges, and everything worked out pretty good. And here I am now in Mongolia. I think that also it's a new chapter in my life. I don't question why I'm here, or I think I'm overcame that periods of who am I, what do I want to do, or what I want to be, or things like that. That I think we all go through that. I mean, you look at the younger generation nowadays, they say, oh, I want to get a bachelor's in medical science. And they go through that period and they say, I don't like it. I want to change my major. So I think that's very normal for every individual to go through this life experience and go through the changes and finding their comfort zone. And many people have that chance to explore, have time, and have the means to do that. And some people don't. Some people just fall in a deep hole and they don't know how to uplift themselves from their struggles or their challenges that they face.
I think it's sticky sometimes to confuse what you do with who you are. And like you have done a lot of things in your life, but it seems like in a situation where there was a huge vacuum of we need a leader, we need to
Need
guidance.
to be told what to do. And what, from my experience, right? Everybody has different parenting skills or leadership skills. The way that I learned is through mistakes. Make a mistake, you learn, turn it into a lesson, see it as a lesson, and grow. It's okay. As long as you have that supporting, loving community that supports you and helps you and guides you and gives you tips every now and then, you'll get through. You'll get through.
When you think about young people, you mentioned people going into biological science, maybe getting their medical degree, wanting to go to university. And that's very much the what you're doing. And it could be certainly connected to who you are. But when you think about Mongolians as a people group who want to preserve this identity as a people group, as a tradition, and not get lost in the doing, how do you see that going as Mongolia grows with advancements and industry?
Well, one thing you have to understand is Mongolia's history in the last 100 years or so. It was a isolated country. It was a communist country. The people were prevented from traveling abroad unless you had certain privileges of the communist authority. So after Mongolia became a democratic state, it opened the doors in so many ways, and it gave everybody an opportunity to go out and explore and try new things, try new cultures, new cuisines, new philosophy, new religions, whatever there is. But if you look at Ulaanbaatar, right, the city, right, the Mongolians find it beautiful. I find it ugly, right? Because I don't know if you would agree or not, in your country, there's every other building is a glass building. Every other country has a lot of similarities, right? But Mongolian culture and identity and their art and literature is so unique that we've been so isolated for such a long time that we think that other people's culture and is something more extraordinary than ours, right? So we copy that and bring that back home and we start developing in that way. But not everything works out that way. We adapted this nomadic lifestyle due to many causes and conditions, not because we were poor, because of climate, because of weather, because of our lifestyle, because of pasture. There's so many things that we ended up living this particular lifestyle, and that is suitable for us. So I come across a lot of people. I kind of divide the Mongolian society into three different categories. The older generation that are truly preserve Mongolians' rich culture and heritage to the maximum they could, no matter under what circumstances they face during communism. They value their tradition, their culture, their heritage. Then we have the second category of individuals who are in their 40s, 50s, late 30s, right? That they had an opportunity to go and explore around the world and ended up coming back home and saying, you know what? I tried everything. I didn't find peace. I come to realize that my heritage is so rich and unique, and that is very suitable for me. Then you have the younger generation who think that, oh, everything that's Mongolian is outdated. It's not suitable for today's time, right? So they reject tradition, they reject their rich heritage culture, and I would say it's okay because no matter how much you change your external appearance, you can change your hair color, you can change your cosmetics, you can change the way that you dress or whatever, but deep down inside, no matter how much you try to cover it up, you're always going to be Mongolian, you know? And they will come to realize that at some point in their life. So change is good, change is needed, but the importance is not forgetting your own roots.
Do you see traditions as primarily nostalgic, something you feel inside, something you reflect on, or does it also have utility? Is it an important feature to leverage advancement and what's next?
When you say culture, it's not just folklore, musical instruments, certain dances. It's a combination of many things come together that makes that culture very unique and very different. What makes you an American? It's not just one thing. It's not just like, oh, McDonald's and Burger King,
Let's hope not. Let's
right?
hope not.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like just the punk rock music. That it's a combination of many things. What is the American dream? It's not just simply buying a house and paying off your mortgage. It's a combination of many things. Similarly, in Mongolia, that's how it is. There is a combination of many things that, and here's the thing, foreigners who come to Mongolia don't come to see a transformed Mongolian that thinks like an American or a European or dresses like a European or thinks or talks like a European. They come here to see a different culture that is very different from their culture. It is our duty to present it the way that they want to see it.
It sounds like you're saying that no matter what the future holds, that unique combination of what makes people Mongolian will always be there.
It has to be there. And the reason is that if Mongolians, they themselves do not preserve their own culture and heritage and identity, who's going to do it?
When I think about who I am as an American, that's such an interesting question, by the way. I mean, that takes a degree of self-reflection. And that was something that you wanted to touch on, was self-reflection, how we see ourselves and our place in society and how we view and interact with others. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, I think nowadays, because of the trend of the global community, we are living in a very competitive world. And when we talk about competitiveness, there's always a good side and a bad side to it. But we're living on the bad side, which involves a lot of greed, desires, attachments. And from a Buddhist philosophical aspect, these are the poisons of the mind: anger, attachment, and ignorance. So we are living in a very competitive world that all our energy and resources are spent on external development, material development, financial development. Very little energy that is spent on self-development. And we forget ourselves. We are working so hard to please someone else, your company or your boss, your supervisor, or whatever it may be. We're working so hard to earn more money. I'm not saying money is not needed. Yes, money is needed. We're spending so much energy to the point where our health is declining. When I say health, I'm not talking about physical health. I'm talking about the mental health. Suicide rate is increasing globally. Schizophrenia is increasing. Depression, all these mental related illnesses. So that's the danger of every community here in Mongolia as well. That's on the rise. So why is that? It is because we forget to ask ourselves we forget to look within ourselves and say, am I happy? If I am happy, is that permanent? Is that long lasting? Right? Our happiness, our understanding of happiness is based on the 5 sensorial levels: what we see, what we smell, what we hear, what we taste, and what we feel. In the Buddhist context, there's something called what we call the 6th sense, and that's the mind. So we forget to connect with our own minds and truly explore and understand how we are as human beings.
There's an increase with people, at least that's what I'm seeing in the West, is what some call navel gazing, where you're just looking at your own belly button all the time. And throwing around the words self-care at the expense of taking care of others and canceling people who so-called trigger you and with whom you don't agree. And it seems like, I don't know, an isolating practice versus like a self-care practice that
We have this all wrong understanding of what self-care means or self-compassionate. Here in the Buddhist context, we talk about be self-compassionate, right? Or self-care. It doesn't mean that go out, get a massage, get a pedicure, manicure, like you come out, get a facial done, and you come out all rejuvenated.
Yeah.
No, that's not self-care. And even if you did that, your massage or whatever, it has nothing to do with your inner world. It has nothing to do with your emotions or your mind. And even if you did enjoy it, how long does your pedicure, manicure last? How long are you going to keep doing that, right? To keep running after something that we call happiness based on our external matters. So here, I think it is very important for us to look within, feel within. We're humans. Do you want to be loved? Absolutely. Do you want to be cared for? Absolutely. Do you want people to be kind to you? Absolutely. Do you want people to be compassionate to you? Absolutely. So don't seek that from others. Seek that within yourself, right? There's a quotation from Buddha where he says, don't look at others as bad as you think they are, but treat them as good as you want to be treated. So here we come into the topic of interdependency or interconnectedness. You and I, we come from different backgrounds, different cultures. Our upbringing was very different. There's so many things that we can pinpoint and say we're very different, right? But at the same time, on a basic human level, we have so much in common. There's so many things that we are same on a emotional level, on a human level. Sometimes forget that. We sometimes forget our inner needs, and we look at the other person as somebody completely different or a stranger.
Or worse, a threat.
Or worse, a threat, right? So that is the danger of every society nowadays. The more narrow-minded we become, the more self-centered we are. The more self-centered we are, the more fear arises. In the long run, we lose so much, right? Let's say this glass of water, right? If I don't share this with you, right? And I'm very self-centered, I say, okay, this water is mine. I'm not going to give you even one drop of water, no matter how much you suffer, right? Now, on a human level, we have what we call this defense mode. There might be a day that you have the water and I don't. And you're going to think, because of this negative emotion or negative thought and less compassionate mind, you're going to say, you know what? Telo Rinpoche didn't give me any water the last time. I have the water now. Why should I give it to him?
Keeping score.
Right. And that's the kind of world that we live in nowadays. So if we look at the world from a holistic point of view, cut off all these nationalities, all these boundaries, and all these you'll belong here, you'll belong there, this kind of mindset. On a human level, we are all interconnected in every level, in every field, economically, materially, medically, in so many ways. Look at the global pandemic. It started in one region and it affected the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the global, what they call the economic crisis that happened back in 2008 or something. It started in one city or one institution that affected the whole city, the whole nation, and the rest of the world. Let's look at the war between Russia and Ukraine right now. Because of two countries' conflict, the rest of the world is having a shortage of grain. There's an inflation that is happening every country. It's not just the two countries that are fighting. So this really shows, I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, this really shows how interconnected we are and how interdependent we are, not as nations. Okay, let's forget that, because that can be very bureaucratic and very, very political. But just on a human level, you're coming to Mongolia as a tourist. That affects us. Economically affects us. Spiritually, it affects us in so many good ways. And similarly, it will definitely affect you when you leave this country.
Every time I travel, it's transformative. That baseline attitude of desire to grow combined with the sense of self, I think is such a magical combination to make the most of traveling. But even if you're not traveling the world, when you go to the grocery store and you have a human interaction with another person,
Right.
to be impacted in a way that is sustainable and meaningful, it's like you need those baseline attitudes that you were talking about, which is kind of, I mean, I really don't know much about Buddhism, but it seems like those are key ingredients. And I'm wondering if you can address the difference of something you talked about off mic about Buddhism as a philosophy, Buddhism as a science, and then as a
Right.
religion.
Right. So it is very wrong to limit Buddhism simply as a religion. I separate it into 3 different categories. Buddhism as a religion or faith. Number 2, Buddhism as a philosophy, way of life. Number 3, Buddhism as a science. And if you ask what field of science it is, it's the science of the mind. Nowadays, there's that saying that Buddhism is becoming popular in the West, right? Okay, to a certain degree, I agree. But is it becoming popular as a religion? No. Is it becoming popular as a philosophy or as a way of life? Absolutely. Is it becoming popular as a science? Absolutely. And the reason I say this is because nowadays that we're dealing with the global crisis, which is depression, mental illnesses, all these different types of forms of depression that we're coming up with, scientists are coming to the understanding that we cannot continue to provide them with drugs. We are making our own people addicted to opium,
And it doesn't even work.
and it's not working, right? Because it just gives a temporary relief. So we have to find a solution. How do we deal with that? Many of the scientists are now studying meditation, mindfulness meditation, awareness meditation, self-centered meditation. I mean, there's like all kinds of different forms that they're coming up with. And the foundation is there in Buddhism that has existed for over thousands of years. And here's the tricky part. To say that this is a Buddhist method, it's not suitable. Why? Because Buddhism is labeled as a religion, right? So this is where they fail to identify these different categories of Buddhism as a philosophy or as a religion or as a science. I do know a number of psychologists, professional psychologists, and I don't want to say that they're Buddhist, but they follow Buddhist principles and Buddhist method of dealing with their patients. But in their field of profession, they cannot say that, well, this is a Buddhist practice or this is a Buddhist tool.
Does it bother you that they're not giving credit to Buddhism?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It's not about promoting Buddhism. It's about promoting wellness, promoting human values. That's the key. And I've been very fortunate to travel quite extensively, deal with a lot of different religious traditions, and understand their culture, understand where they're coming from, understand their beliefs and how their mind works. The more I interact with people, the more respect grows within myself. And that's the beauty of our world. I have this habit of, comparing life with food as a metaphor.
That's the best metaphors.
Right. I mean, let's say you go to a banquet, right? And they serve only white rice. Is that interesting? Absolutely not, right? So life is a banquet. There's so many good things and bad things, tasteful things, spicy things, lame taste. There's so many things, and that's how life is. Enjoy what's on the table. And what is not enjoyable, just let it be.
Talk to me about secular ethics. What is that connected at all to what you're talking about with philosophy and sense of self and mental health?
So secular, the word secular, right? Now we have to understand, if you look at it from a Christian perspective, that has a very negative understanding of secularism. Secularism in Christianity means anti-God, right? Here, when I say secularism, this falls in the principles of ancient Indian tradition or ancient Indian thought, where secularism has no ethnicity, secularism has no religion, secularism means no division, and it is based on humans.
Some would call that atheism.
That probably comes from a Christian point of view,
Probably.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at the atheist person. Does he or she want to be happy? Absolutely. Does he or she want to have a burrito? That is their right. Why should I be here to judge and say, well, you don't believe in God or you don't believe in any religious tradition, therefore you don't deserve that burrito? That's an individual right. And I should respect it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether he or she likes spicy food, that's their choice. But on a human level, does that person want to be loved? Absolutely. Does that person deserve love? Absolutely. Does that person need compassion? Absolutely. So what makes it different? I'm a Buddhist. I want compassion, love, kindness, care. And who am I to say that, oh, he's a non-believer, he doesn't deserve that? I look at everyone as a human brother and sister.
This is so interesting because right now, and since I've been here, it's like I'm observing things around me. I'm observing the environment, people around me, what's considered customary, but I'm also observing myself and like my interaction with things and my response to things. And my response to what you're talking about, which is why I've been like tearing up a couple of times when you're speaking, is sorry.
It's okay. You're human. And that's the beauty of it.
It is. I think like when I got here, it's like, okay, I'm going to a different place. It's a separate place. It's a new place, which it is. It's all those things. But it's so interesting because when I expected to talk to you, it was like, we're going to talk about this box that is Mongolia. We're going to talk about this box that is Buddhism. And they're separate and distinct, which they are. But they're also humans. And when you're talking, like everything you're saying is like, I'm a visual person. So I think in pictures a lot. And I'm picturing when you're speaking, like I see a globe, I see a world when you're speaking. And it's like one world with no made up borders, as you implied. And it's so fascinating because I think the other times that I've traveled to places, I see the people and the places as somewhere you go.
And that's why in the future, wherever you go, as not as a place you go to, but as a place you go to learn. It educates you. It connects you. It brings tremendous benefit on a human level. And I'm definitely sure that if you look at it from an educational perspective, it is so enriching. It broadens your thinking. It broadens everything. Spiritually, when I say spiritually, I'm not talking about any kind of religious beliefs, but inner world. We all have this inner world that we have to connect with. And right now you're in tears. Why? Because there's certain emotions that you connected with, and you're able to feel it, sense it, connect with it, identify it. So Just like as I mentioned earlier, because we live in a competitive world. Let's look at the educational system in every school in the world. There's not a single subject that teaches you how to be loving and caring. It's all about how to make money, how to develop, how to be tricky, how to manipulate the law, how to manipulate the tax system,
Or simply how to pass your
right?
test, how to pass the
How to pass
class.
your test.
Yeah.
You go to medical school, it's like, okay, these are the drugs that we're going to provide to make our society more drug addictive, you know? There's not a single thing that teaches us that A equals compassion and B equals love or C equals care and so on. So that's why there's a wonderful program that I would like to mention,
Please.
taking this opportunity, that is a curriculum for elementary, middle school, and high school kids that is called SE Learning, SE Learning. And SE stands for Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning. And this is not a bunch of people that came together and say, well, we got to teach kids how to be sociable because they're too connected with their gadgets. We got to get rid of that. No, this curriculum was designed based on years of study and research that teaches kids how to be more sociable on a human-to-human level. Kids are very emotional these days, very sensitive. When I say emotional, I mean that they're very sensitive.
Meaning they're not as resilient as they could be.
They're not.
I see that.
And why is that? Because they don't know how to connect with their own emotions and feelings. They forget the strength that they have as kids, the ability to learn, ability to overcome, the ability to do good, or the ability to be patient, the ability to stay silent, the ability to be compassionate to someone who's bullying you or whatever, and also to be ethical. We want our kids to be ethical behavior. We want them to have certain morals. And these ethics that is being taught in this curriculum has nothing to do with religion. Everything is based on a human level. And it's a wonderful program. And we've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to introduce this curriculum into Mongolia. And within the next 2 years, this is a curriculum that should be in all schools in Mongolia. And the Minister of Education has adopted this and passed a resolution for this to be implemented in all schools. And are we going to see the effects right away? Probably not. But in the next 15 to 20 years, when those kids grow up and go out into the world, as we say, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully that they will take these tools of how to manage and regulate their emotions. I don't like the word control your emotions because that kind of has like kind of dictatorship or force kind of understanding to it.
Like it will explode later. Like it'll build up and then it'll be ugly later.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But I like to say manage your emotions.
Well, executive function.
Yes.
Appreciating them while moving through the world, understanding other people's emotions. Because you're absolutely right. When a kid can't recognize, appreciate, and process emotions in a healthy way, they also can't accept other people's emotions. It kind of goes back to that interconnectedness that you're talking about. It's not just about you or little Johnny becoming a better version of himself, but it's like that interconnectedness of society of like, well, if one of us is broken, it affects all of this. And that's very future thinking. Did you help develop this or were you part of the team? What was your role?
No, I was not part of the development, but I heard about it at the very beginning stage, and I just kind of been observing it from a distance. And after they did a global launch of this particular program, we were very fortunate to have a group of people, like-minded people, that said, this is a program that we need to bring to Mongolia for sure. And what we did is, one of the things that made it very successful is when we started this trial with 6 schools, 5 public schools and 1 private school. Parallel to that, we did a scientific survey, which was very critical, right? How they are at the very beginning, their behavior, how they are 5 months later or 5 to 6 months later, and at the end of the year, how their behavior has changed, how their way of thinking have changed, so many different ways. So we were able to come up with a scientific survey and result and present that to the Minister of Education. And that's science-based, right? And I don't know if the minister himself believed it or not, but nevertheless, he said, I want to visit 2 schools, right? So he made random visits to these 2 schools without announcing. But he went to the 2 schools and interacted with the kids. And he was really impressed by how kids were able to express what compassion means.
That's interesting.
Here's also one interesting thing, right? There was a private school, right? And what the girl said when we were interacting, and the minister was interacting, he said, what's your most favorite subject? And she said, sea learning. And she was like, why? That is the only time the teachers listen to me.
Oh, wow.
Right? That says a lot.
That's major.
We don't listen to our kids. We don't listen about how they feel, why they're angry, why they're sad, why they're sleepy. We just come to school and say, okay, open up your books and this is your homework. This is your assignment. I don't care how you feel. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you eat. I don't care how many hours you sleep. I don't care. Just as long as your homework is on this table. That's all I care about.
Like a factory.
Right. And that's the attitude that we have everywhere.
Well, this is so fascinating because you were talking about children being resilient and talking about the future of Mongolia, the future of Buddhism. And then, of course, we spoke about the traditions and the contrast of the value of the traditions versus the value of an industrial mindset. And it seems like you, as a person, have one eye looking backwards, going, okay, and then one eye looking forward, go, okay, we need to invest here. We need to help our kids here. Let's shore them up in this way so that the future looks bright. How do you personally, with doing both of those things, also become present in the very moment that you're in?
That's the hard part. And the only way that you can do that is through self-reflection. I'm not saying that I'm enlightened or I'm special, I have higher abilities or extraordinary powers or whatever. No. I reached this point because I fell down a lot, struggled a lot. And when I say struggle, it doesn't necessarily mean financial struggle. We're all struggling financially. But my struggles have been psychological and emotional. From the age of 7, I grew up far away from my parents. I don't want to say that is traumatic, but it does make an impact, right? But I look at it from a positive side. I am so glad and happy that I grew up far away from the streets of Philadelphia. My immediate elder brother, he was murdered. And there was only a few years difference. He is the one that took me to kindergarten. We went to school together. He was my protector. He guarded me. He took care of me. So there's a lot of feelings, love. And he was murdered in a bar. Why? Because he simply said, what are you looking at? And that's the world we live in. You get killed for asking somebody in a bar, what you looking at? I lost my oldest brother to self-inflicted wound, committed suicide. I have a sister who passed away at a very early age because she had an addiction. So there's so many things I can look at negatively. At the same time, there's many successful, happily living relatives that I have, but there's so many advantages that I had growing up so far away. I could have been shot. I could have killed myself. I could have been addicted to drugs and alcohol. There's so many bad things that could have happened to me. And I've been very fortunate to be far away from that and observe from a distance and feel grateful. That's one thing that we fail in life, is being grateful. The moment we wake up, we complain. Today is going to be a hot day. I was hot all night. I was having hot flashes, right? Or it was too dry or whatever, something. I had to get up and pee like 3 times at night, whatever, you know? There's a very rare moment that we wake up and say, I'm happy to be alive. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to have a warm bed, no matter how hot or cold it was. I'm grateful to have air conditioning to regulate the temperature. I'm grateful to have running water, hot or cold or warm. I'm grateful to wake up and be able to brew coffee. We have this habit of constantly complaining. This is not enough. That's not enough. This is this that way, this that way. That's the wrong way. This is that way. So I think that really pulls us down. I always tell people there's 3 weapons in life to overcome all the suffering, the pain, the struggles, the disadvantages, and whatnot. Hope. We should never give up on hope. Hopeful for a better day, hopeful for a better salary, hopeful for a better whatever. And we always have to be optimistic. Optimism is very important. And number 3, faith. And when I say faith, I'm not talking about some external being or some celestial being or enlightened being. Have faith in yourself. I can do it. I can overcome it. I believe myself. I can be patient. I can manage my emotions. These are the 3 weapons in life that we can move forward and overcome all the challenges that we face in our day-to-day lives.
I love that those are such present qualities. Those are qualities about come into your body, think about what you're thinking about, and center yourself in the moment in order to move forward. It's interesting. It kind of goes back to that interconnectedness. Like, what am I feeling now in order to move forward to what's next? Not in a race mindset, but in a grounded, balanced, anchored way. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been really great.
Yeah. Let me end by asking you a question.
I'll allow it.
Do you worry?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Whatever worry it may be, can it be solved?
Definitely.
Then why worry? Right?
Right.
I'll end this by saying one of my favorite quotations, and I meditated on this for like a whole week because it didn't make sense to me, right? Because we worry so much, right? There's a book that's called A Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. In Sanskrit, they call it Bodhicharya Avatara. It was written in the 9th century, and it's still relevant even today. And there's a quotation where it says, if the problem can be solved, why worry? Right? If the problem can be solved, worry.
Why worry? Oh, that's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's all a mental projection of how you look at things. We focus so much on the negativity that we build up negativity within us, right? It manifests, it vibrates and creates that energy. And what are you creating? You're creating negative energy.
More of the bad thing that's freaking you out.
Right?
Yeah.
So love, compassion, kindness, care, they're all interconnected like a spider web. One good emotion sparks the next one. It elevates and manifests.
I like that. Thank you. This has been so great. Much more than I expected on very many levels. And I hope my listeners got as much out of it as I did. If people would want to learn more about maybe the Sea Learning program, or you have a special travel initiative that you've been
Yes, I started this project, which is called Inner World Journey. So many people like to visit different countries, but what I do see is the majority of the people that travel, it's just like for touristic purposes or to like tick off their bucket list. Like, oh,
the Instagram picture.
Right. Yeah, I've been there, done that, seen it, whatever, which is okay. But there should be a double impact. And through these journeys, we guide people of how to interconnect with their inner world, not the outer world that we see, but also their inner world as well. So it's a combination of inner and outer world.
Where can people read more about that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we just started a couple months ago, but anyway, if you type in inner-world world-journey.com, and you'll definitely find us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again. This has been fantastic, and I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you.